Hey everyone, I'm Liz Fairy and welcome back to my channel. Today we'll be doing something a little different. I find myself in need of a garter belt for some costume endeavors that I'm about to start, and I have almost everything I need right now to make them myself. So I thought I'd show you guys my process of drafting a pattern and sewing a garter belt for myself from my own measurements. As always, all the materials I used for this project are in the description below. I started out drafting the pattern, a process which I did film for you all, but unfortunately I realized you probably wouldn't be able to see what I'm doing, what with the camera being so far away, and with the pencil lines being so thin. So I decided to do a little scaled down demonstration for you all after the fact, using centimeters instead of inches, so that the whole thing fits in the camera's view, and using a marker to draw my lines so that they're thicker and more visible. Of course, when you do this, use your own measurements, and use a pencil so that your lines aren't too thick, or they'll be somewhat inaccurate. For the purposes of this demonstration, it doesn't really matter since I won't be using the pattern in the end. So before we begin, we need to take some measurements. We'll need the waist circumference, the hip circumference, and the length from the waist to the hip to start with. Later on in the process, we'll also need to measure from the center back along the waistline to where we want the back leg strap to go. And eventually we'll need to measure the width of the straps we'll be using, as well as the hook and eye strip that will act as the back closure. I harvested these straps and the hook and eye strip from a couple of old bras that no longer fit me. Also, side note, make sure that the garter clips you get match the width of the bra straps so that the elastic can slide through. Now let's begin the drafting process. First, I draw a rectangle that's half of my hip measurement by the length from waist to hip, which for me was 24 by 7. Once I have my rectangle, I'll cut it out. Next, I need to divide my rectangle into fourths along the longer length. To do that, I'll fold the paper perfectly in half. Mine doesn't fold perfectly because I used a marker to mark my lines instead of a pencil, and that's why you should use a pencil for this part. Now mark that fold line. And then fold each half in half again. Once again, mark those fold lines. And now I'm going to label the front as the center front, the back as the center back, and each line as the back leg, the side seam, and the front leg. Also, I'll note that the top is going to be the waist and the bottom the hip. Next, I need to find the difference in size between the waist and the hip measurement, which I can find by subtracting the waist circumference from the hip circumference. Then divide that number in half since we're just working with half of the hip measurement for the pattern piece. Next, divide that measurement by 8 so that we can remove that excess at the center front, the center back, and each of the 3 lines. For me, this measurement ended up as 0.59, but I decided to round down to a ½ inch instead. You may get a weird number, but you can round it down to something a bit easier, like I did, and it should work just fine. Now, along the top waistline, I'll measure out that amount from all my lines, once at each the center front and center back, and once on each side of the front leg, side seam, and back leg. Now connect each of the marks to each corresponding line, from the top waistline to the bottom hip line. Now for the fun part. I'm going to close these darts. To do this, first I'll cut along the middle line of each dart, but not completely through the paper, leaving a sort of hinge. Do this with all 3 of these darts. Now I'll cut along just one of the dart legs, one of those 2 lines I had just made from the waist to the hip, cutting off half the triangle of the dart, but without cutting through the hinge, so that everything is still connected. Do this with all 3 darts. Now, with the help of a bit of tape, I'm going to close each dart by folding over and matching up the line that I just cut with the other leg of the dart that I didn't cut, then taping the dart closed. Again, do this with every dart. Finally, cut off the extra from the center front and the center back. And when finished, I'll add a slight curve to the lines at the top and bottom of the shape. Make sure that you make the top and bottom of the front and back a 90-degree angle to make it easier to sew later. Now here's where those extra measurements come in. From your center back at the waist, measure out to where you want the back strap to end at the back of your leg. If you have more of a butt and less thigh, this might be further over than where our back leg line currently is on our pattern. Right now on my pattern, my back leg measurement is 4 inches in along the waistline. But I want to put the strap 6 inches in along the waistline. That means I'll need to add 1.5 inches to the back leg line. So I'll mark a couple of points 1.5 inches from the current back leg line, keeping the points parallel to the line. Then join those points, again making sure the lines are parallel. This will be the new back leg line. Now we need the width of the straps and the back closure. My straps are 1/2 inch wide, so centered at the bottom of each leg line, I'll measure 1/2 inches. The back closure is 2 inches wide, so at the back I'll measure 2 inches. At the front, I just made it 3 inches, but you can really make this part as wide or as narrow as you want. Next, add curved lines in between all those points. And that's our pattern. Now let's cut it out. If you like, you can also cut down the side seam line and make this pattern 2 pieces to fit it easier on your fabric. This is what I ended up doing on my fabric because the single pattern piece didn't fit. Now I'll retrace the pattern and add seam allowances. I added 1/2 inch for seam allowances, but you can use whatever you prefer. If you did cut the pattern down the side seam, make sure to add seam allowances along that side too. Next, I'll mark the new pattern so that I know to cut the front piece on the fold and to cut 2 of the back piece. Next, lay out the pattern pieces on your fabric and cut out all the pieces. I cut out 2 copies of the pattern, one from an old pair of black jeans, a pair with no stretch, and one from a black quilting cotton for the liner. Next, sew the side seams of each set of pattern pieces together. Now I've sewn the side seams of both the denim and the lining layers. Next, I'll pin the denim to the liner right sides together. I need to sew both layers together along the curved sides, making sure to start and end my stitching about 1 inch from each straight side, so that I don't sew closed all the places that I need to add the hardware at the ends of the strap and at the back closure. This also leaves me free to flip this back to the right way around later. So make sure to leave about 1 inch or so unstitched at the end of each strap and at each side of the back. Your stitching line should look like this. Now I've sewn the denim to the liner. Next I'll use some pinking shears to clip the curvy seams that I just sewed, once again staying about an inch away from the ends of the straps and the back closure, so that I can fold in and finish the ends later. Clipping the curvy seams like this will allow them to stretch and make it easier to iron. Once the curves are clipped, flip it the right way around through one of the openings left at the back closure. I'll use the end of my crochet hook to help me flip the ends of the straps. You could maybe use a pencil or something for this. I found that the grip of the hook helped me a lot. Next, I folded the ends of all the straps and the back closure and set the fold with my flat iron. This will make it easier to sandwich the hook and eye strips and the elastic straps and sew them in later. Before I do that though, I top stitched along the curved sides, again starting the stitching about an inch from the ends of the straps and the back closure so that I can still place all my hardware afterward. This time though, when I got to the end of one of the curved seams, I just continued sewing straight across to the other side instead of stopping and restarting the stitching. You don't have to do this if you want, I just did it to strengthen the seams and to decorate the belt with a bit of top stitching. Afterwards, I sandwiched the hook and eye closure and the metal rings of each of the straps inside the pressed seams, before hand sewing them closed. The last step is to add the garter clips to the bottoms of the straps at the height of the socks. You can attach them by machine, but I did this by hand with a backstitch. I think I may need to modify the socks in some way though, so that they come up high enough. I ordered the fabled plus-size friendly thigh highs from Sock Dreams that everyone raves about, and they almost fit my extremely thick thighs. I have an idea for something I can try out to fit the socks better, but that will have to wait until the next video in the series, in which I embark on some corsetry adventures. So if you'd like to see how the socks turn out, and see the corset that I'm making, be sure that you subscribe to the channel, and click the bell icon to get notifications every time I post. Also, don't forget to check out my Patreon if you'd like to support what I do here on the channel. You can get some cool perks from Patreon, like seeing my videos early and ad-free. You can find out more about that at patreon.com/fairyrings. If you made a project based on this or any of my designs, I'd love to see it. You can find all of my social media links in the description below, or tag me on Instagram at LizFairy. Let me know what you guys thought of this garter belt project in the comments. I don't do a lot of sewing on the channel, so your feedback is most appreciated. Now I really need to get back to this corset. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you all next time. Bye! And I think wearing the loose-fitting shirt with the leggings underneath was a good move, because you can't describe this as being too sexy for YouTube.